trust. Voluntarily sure not a must. Don't wanna stop the magic, let her up. What's going on? What is going on? C'est une chanson d'amour. What is going on? What is love break du jour? What is going on? See my future in the blue. What is going on? Going on you. I wanna take you to the funky shop. Get the cakes that make us heat up. Light the fire, I'm a guest in your kitchen. Create the food we both been mission. So let me take it, I wanna invade you. Celebrate, open the cake, yeah. Got a recipe to show you like it. Gonna feed you bit by bit. Hey, Black Betty. Hey, Black Betty. Betty, Hey, Black Betty. Hey, Black Betty. I wanna take you to the funky shop. I wanna take you to the funky shop. I wanna take you to the funky shop. Just put it in your basket and enjoy. I wanna take you to the funky shop. I wanna take you to the funky shop. I wanna take you to the funky shop. Just put it in your
Hey. Never fall in love, no, I never get close. Independent girl, I can do it alone. Yeah. Signing all the papers, cashing all the checks. Focused on my business, yeah, I do it best. Yeah. Gave a guy my number, he's all in my life. Sweet, but reminds me of a better time. He's giving me his all, but I'm giving him less. I'm feeling kinda bad, cause I'm making him stress. Wish you could be someone else. Wish you could be someone else. Once upon a time I was deep in love. Had my whole heart, it was more than enough. He took me around the world, he was changing my life. Spoiled me, I never had to ask him twice. We were holding on strong through the good and the rough. Suddenly I found him packing his stuff. I don't know what was real, don't know what was a lie. But know I could compare no matter what they try. Wish you could be someone else. Someone else. Wish you could be someone else. I'm thinking about someone else. Yeah, you're cute, but I'm thinking about someone else. I'm thinking about someone else. You're my boo, but I'm thinking about someone else. I'm thinking about someone else. Yeah, you're cute, but I'm thinking about someone else. I'm thinking about someone else. You're my boo, but I'm thinking about someone else. Wish you could be someone else. Wish you could be someone else. Wish you could
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio. Welcome back to another UA Office Hours, number 109. This one's going to be a fun one. I mean, they're all fun, but this one is going to be a little something different. It's going to be a little more stereo, is my feeling. Because we're going to be talking about mid-side mixing and mastering techniques. What is mid-side, how to use it with compression, with EQ, and then by the end, we're going to do some really kind of crazy out there, how to stereoize mono sources. But of course, all along the way, we'll give you guys some ideas, some guidance, some tips, some tricks, and lots of examples in store today, and lots of other fun stuff as well. But thankfully, I don't have to do it all alone because we got Matt and Drew here with me. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Good. How you doing, Ben?
Doing great, man. It's another beautiful Monday. And, you know, this question for the chat, question for you guys here with me. On a scale of 1 to every single session, how often do you use mid-side when you're mixing or mastering a track?
I probably use it. Go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna say I'd say every session. I mean, I think it's pretty much every session. There's always a little, as we'll see today. There's a lot. There's this entails a lot of stuff. So even if it's just a touch, or I touch one thing, or if there's stereo sources, it's pretty likely I'm going to use it a little bit, at least once in every mix, I'd say, if not more.
Yeah. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while there's a mix I don't do MS on, but yeah, probably 80-90% of the time. And I usually use it kind of later in the mix process because, an MS EQ isn't going to, or something like an MS EQ isn't going to create stereo width for you, but it definitely enhances what's already there. So yeah, I'll usually use it as like a stereo sweetener towards the end.
Nice. Yep. And I am decidedly parked on 100%. Maybe a rough mix I don't put some MS processing on, but basically everything else, once it's into the mix process, for me, there's at least something on the end of chain that's like opening it up a little bit, sometimes opening up a lot. But of course, it goes, there's more to mid-side, there's more to this than just stereo width, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about today is just how extreme all this different MS processing can be. There's subtle uses for it, there's real practical uses, and then there's very creative uses for it as well. So I guess, Drew, probably the best way to kick this conversation off, right, is to talk about what is mid-side. It gets thrown around a lot. You see MS, You see some indifference, you see lat vert. There's a few different names for it, but essentially, how would you describe this processing to somebody?
Yeah, I think for me, the simplest way to think about mid-side or MS is it's an alternative way of thinking about and of just dealing with and interacting with and processing anything stereophonic audio. So, traditionally we think in terms of left and right, and we have a discrete left channel and a discrete right channel. Mm-hmm. And, when we process things, we're processing, both of them or maybe one or the other in some rare instances. But with mid-side, it's basically an alternative way of looking at that. And rather than distinguishing between left and right, it distinguishes between the center and the sides, or the mid and the sides. And as you use the term sum and difference is kind of an old school reference to the fact that the way mid-side is actually encoded is by it takes what's common to the left and right. In other words, it sums the left and right, and that's what the mid image is, right? That's the phantom center aspect of a stereophonic sound. Mm-hmm. And then the sides are the difference. What's different between the left and the right? So, and we're actually going to look at some diagrams here and some matrices, and you'll see that one of the ways that it's encoded and decoded is by phase inverting the sides and then adding the phase inverted versions together, but also adding the phase aligned versions together, right?
Yeah.
So if you share my screen, you'll see that I've got some images here that might help people to sort of get their heads around this. I figured I would start with mid-side miking because I find that that's often the way in which most people get introduced to mid-side processing in general. Mm-hmm. So here on the left, we can see that we have a diagram, from one of our blogs. Actually, this is from one of our U Audio blogs. If you're not familiar with, if you're not reading our blog, definitely check out our blog. We have lots of great information. Lots of great articles. This is an image taken from that, and it kind of shows you the, how these mics are oriented towards the source. And if you look on the far right here, you can see what that looks like in the real world. We have a front address cardioid condenser here pointing towards the source, and then the mid mic is gathering the sides. Down here at the bottom, you can see how they correspond to each other. So if you've never seen mid-side miking, this is kind of the basic idea. And then we've got a picture of the matrix here. And if you look at that, you can see that you can either encode or decode from or to mid side through a matrix like this.
Well,
We
that's
don't need
kinda-
to go over all the details, but
I was like, that's kind of, it can get, to some people, right, it can look overwhelming, right? You've got
Yeah.
got a bunch of like triangles, you got lines going, but essentially, Drew, your first way of explaining it, I think, was, to me, like one of the easiest to follow, right? It's essentially,
Yeah.
instead of separating your stereo audio into left and right, which is how we all typically deliver files and how we all listen to music, mid-side allows you, through this crazy little inverter, this phase matrix that Drew's showing there, you're able to split that into saying, cool, what's the information that's right in the middle of my signal, and
Yep.
what's the information on the side of my signal? And by
Exactly.
doing this, you can now put a compressor and have it, affect what's happening in the middle differently than what's happening on the sides, or you can use this to, just turn up the sides on their own and create more stereo width. So there's, as we dive into all of our examples today, you guys are going to see, like, just the power of separating audio this way opens up so many really cool processing techniques that
Yeah,
can be,
for sure.
they're great to have in your back pocket, because you're gonna run into situations where the left right balance isn't your issue, it's the like middle and sides that you want to affect.
Yeah, so I used mid-side miking as a way to introduce this, because I thought maybe that was the way in which most people were exposed to mid-side. But if we move on beyond the miking technique, right, and what, in fact, we're not going to be covering the mic technique today. Today's all about mid-side processing. And in order to understand mid-side processing, we want to dig a little bit deeper and to understand that with pre-recorded material, or even live material, that is stereophonic in nature, we have the ability to apply this same encode decode process. And this, the origins of this go all the way back to, early vinyl disc cutting here. So you can see up here at the top, we have what a mono record would have looked like, the groove of a mono record, because the stylus only needs to basically transduce one monophonic recording. And then, somebody came up with this really clever idea in order to do stereo vinyl. We needed to have, a left and right side of the groove, and the stylus is now moving in both a lateral and vertical arrangement in order to create stereo. So you can see that on the far right-hand side picture, where now the stylus is doing double duty. Instead of mono, it's stereo. Hence, we get this lat vert or mid-side thing. And this, I know one of your examples, Ben, is going to be with one of the earliest compressors to ever have this, which is the Fairchild. The Fairchild 670 has this lat vert mode, which if you don't know the history, right, you might not know that that's actually code for, or another way of talking about mid-side. So yeah, so that's just a little quick, delve into the history and looking at the matrix and all the sort of technical stuff. But yeah, we don't want to dwell on this too much, because we want to have some fun with this. So we can move on to the examples. But hopefully that helps people to sort of get their head around what this is all about. And
I'll raise my hand here, and everyone else in the chat, if you just now learned that lateral vertical meant that. Because
Right, yeah.
I kind of made sense that lat vert was like, I guess I just instantly translated to mid side in my head and never thought about physically what's happening to the needle to create that and why they named it that. So I am today years old when I learned what lat vert actually represents in the real world. But yeah, Drew, thanks for setting me up there perfectly.
yeah, sure.
The first one, when we talk about mid-side, one of the most popular things to do with mid-side is compression. And one of our favorite ones that has this built into it is the Fairchild 670. So I've got the UAD 670 pulled up here, and this is in kind of a typical, how you would pull it up. I've tweaked the settings a little bit to set me up for success here, but let me walk you guys through kind of how to get into mid-side mode, how to start dialing in settings, and then there's a couple of really important switches that you're going to want to flip to really unlock the most power out of this. So let me play this example just real quick. This is still in left-right mode. Fairchild's being asked to do a little bit of work, but it's not like a overwhelming example, hopefully. And let's take a listen. So we got heavy drums, we got super wide guitars. There's I felt like this would be a good one, so that way we have a nice example to really delineate what's in the middle and what's out here on the sides. So the key control in the Fairchild is this knob right here, which switches from left-right mode to lat vert. You notice how the lat vert is red. So you can notice it's labeled at other places, right? So the threshold, the time constant, you've got your sidechain filter, is also now affecting the left and the right differently. But the important one that we're going to come back to here in a second is these link controls. So right now, the sidechain and the controls are both linked. So whenever I make changes to the controls, both the mid and the side controls are moving together. Same with the sidechain. So the amount of compression for the middle and the sides are linked together. So let me play that again. And in the middle of this example, I'm gonna unlink the sidechains. So now the mid and side are free to compress independently, and you're gonna instantly hear the difference here. Kind of a huge difference, right? All of a sudden the guitars they feel like they're unchained. Like the guitars are allowed to be out here on the sides on their own, but the middle is, you can even see it in the meters, right guys? Like the lateral, which is, the mid channel right now, it's pushing hard because it's got drums, it's got bass, it's got heavy material in there that's really, getting past the threshold and starting to compress. So this instantly kind of unlocks those two. You get instant kind of stereo width. But now we can get in there, and by unlinking the controls, now I can start to kind of tweaking this. So, that was a lot of compression. It's a little more compression than what I would want to do maybe on that mid channel, because it's just kind of holding it down the whole time. So I can come in here, I'm going to adjust the thresholds now. Now that I'm in this mid side mode and everything's kind of moving on its own, I can do a little bit less on the middle and maybe actually add a little bit of compression to the sides. So let's hear what that sounds like. So there, by tweaking the thresholds a little bit, I'm able to now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm hearing this in my headphones. Like, it feels like the mix is dancing around in a totally different way. Like the way the two parts are all interacting. And then one of the other things I did while we were playing back there is I actually increased the input gain on the vertical channel, which are my sides. So now, again, I'm just adding more stereo width. I'm kind of pushing those guitars and the reverb and the stuff that's happening outside of that center channel are now pushing into the compressor a little bit more, pushing against it, and you're getting this just really gluey, kind of rocking compression artifacts.
I think since most of your bottom end is in the middle image, you might want to. That's a great example because you can push and drive the sides which have less low end content, and they'll break up less. The low end stuff will break up, and maybe not in a good way. So this is kind of way like you're like saturating the sides a little bit more than the mid, and that's a cool vibe.
Yeah. So this is and there's, I guess, the one other last control that I could use, right, Drew? Since it is so heavy, is the sidechain filter also separates. Yeah. So I could come in here and I can make the mid channel listen a little bit less to the bass, so it's reacting less to the kick and the bass in there as well. But yeah, this is one of my favorite ones to really get in there and kind of open up with the mid side mode. But thankfully, it's not the only one, because there's many compressors in the world, but there's only some that do some beautiful mid side stuff. And one of my other favorite ones is the Manley Vari-Mu. So very similar, guys, to the Fairchild that we were just dealing with. Just the controls are in a slightly different place. So to kick this in, or actually here, let me default this so I can, same as we did on the Fairchild, I'll kind of walk you guys through how to get this set up. So step one, kick it into mid side mode. So you go from left, right into MS, and you'll notice there's an in and out control. There's some crazy stuff you could do with this, guy. So you could actually technically use the Manley Vari-Mu to come in as left, right, and then output the mid side if you wanted to put an EQ, like a massive passive, or I guess literally any EQ after this one, and then any plugin after the Vari-Mu would be receiving mid side signals instead of left, right. So just imagine what you guys could do with that sort of separation inside of other plugins. But for now, I'm going to do in and out. So it's, encoding into MS, processing the compression in mid side, and then re-encoding it to left, right on its output. And then similarly, I'm going to unlink my side chains. So the big thing to know, guys, I mentioned this right away of like unlinking your side chains when you're in mid side mode. It's probably what you want to do, but it's not always what you want to do, right? I think we talked about, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. We've talked about it a bunch last week too, of like how your stereo field, when you're using bus compressors, if you unlink the left and right side chain, how your vocal can start dancing left to right depending on how much compression's happening. Same thing is happening here. So there are advantages sometimes to leaving the side chain linked, so you're not getting that really pronounced, hey, my sides are not getting compressed, but the drums in the middle are. So don't do this just by default because I'm saying it, but listen to your material and know that if you're going for an effect where you really want that exaggerated compression difference between your mid and side, that's where you would come and unlink your side chain, and then probably likewise unlink your controls. So now the left channel is my mid, the right channel is my side, and I can tweak to my heart's content. So let me check that out. This is without, and now with.
Nice.
I like I said, I'm 100% of my mixes are using mid-side in some way. Sometimes it's these ones. A lot of times it's EQ mid-side stuff, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But let me just real quickly go over what I did as we were listening there. You'll notice I left my mid-channel threshold. The minute I hit play, it was already compressing a decent amount. So fine, I'll just leave it like it is. I just raised the output to give it some makeup gain. And then I came over to the side channel. Again, my guitars, my reverbs, brought the threshold down until I started seeing some action on the meters, and then really exaggerated its output. And that's really what kind of stretched out my stereo field to the final mix. Yeah, mid-side compressors, Vari-Mu, Fairchild. There's a couple others as well. Highly, highly recommend checking these out and making use of tricks like this to be able to add stereo width, add some stereo compression interest to your mixes or masters. Which I think kind of brings us, I guess I wanted to shout out a couple of the other UAD plugins that do this, right? The Elysia compressor and the Chandler Zener limiter, which is kind of similar to the Fairchild in lots of different ways. So yeah, there's a bunch of them here inside of UAD that you guys can check out for mid-side. So yeah, as I mentioned, mid-side compression, use it a bunch. The thing I use even more though is EQ. But Matt, I'll let you kind of demonstrate some mid-side EQ techniques and tricks. Right on.
See, I've got a mix session here in live, and I just have the BX Digital V3 on my master here right before the limiter. So the way I like to use mid-side EQ a lot of the time is, like I was saying, just as kind of a stereo sweetener in like the last stage of the mix process. So I'll do a lot of things on the individual tracks to kind of create stereo width, and then I use the any kind of mid-side EQ on the master to kind of enhance that stereo width. So what I'm doing here, I'll kind of go through the workflow with the Brainworx BX, because it's a very cool workflow, especially if you're just getting started with mid-side EQ. The first thing I would do when you open up this plugin is you can solo the sides and you can solo the mid, which is a really good way to just kind of hear for yourself, what the separation is between those two channels. So let me do that first. I'm just going to solo up the side channel here, and you'll be able to hear whatever's different between the left and right here. So yeah, I'm just hearing the sides. You'll notice there's not a lot of low end. It's because I have this mono maker turned up, which basically is saying everything below 72 hertz, it's going to sum to mono. So that's only going to be in the mid channel. Now let's take a listen to the mid channel here. You'll hear it's a lot of the drums, a lot more of the low end is in the mid channel right in the center. So yeah, just loading this plugin up with none of the EQ settings active. It's a good way just to kind of see where you're at with your stereo image just off the bat. And then you can kind of get into EQing the different sides, the different ways you want to. So what I'm doing here is kind of just grabbing certain elements in the sides. So mostly like the synths, the reverb for the synths, the delay for the synths, and then some of this Foley percussion that I have happening. Kind of just enhancing that in the stereo or in the side, so you get a little bit wider image for those particular elements. And then rolling off the low end so that everything in the low end is kind of right in the middle of the stereo image. So I'm going to play just a before and after with this kind of stereo sweetening in the high end going on. So here's with. Then here's without. So with. And without. So it's again, it's not like creating stereo width, but it's taking the stereo width that I have and kind of making it 20% wider is the way I like to think of it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of enhancing it a little bit more.
I mean, it adds so much life to the elements on the side, right? Like it's adding a little bit of energy, a little sizzle, all to those like pads and ambient stuff going around the drums.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you still have the main elements that you want to pay attention to are pretty much in the center, but it's adding all this ear candy or enhancing all this ear candy around it, and what just makes it feel so much fuller and so much more interesting. Mm-hmm. And so one other thing that I like about the workflow in this particular plugin, when you grab these EQ bands, they automatically solo. So let me play it and you'll hear what I mean. As soon as I grab this EQ band, now I can sweep through the sides and kind of find, the particular elements that I want to enhance. So for example, like there's a lot of that Foley percussion, the hi-hats. So that's why I placed that band there. But yeah, it's really intuitive workflow. You can just grab a band, you're automatically listening to just that band on just the sides of the mid, depending on which control you grabbed. So you never have to think about what you're hearing and what you're adjusting. It just automatically happens depending on what you touch.
Yeah.
So yeah, a really good way to get into the mid-side EQ, this particular plugin.
That's why that one, to me, that's one of my go-to fixers on the mix bus, is like getting, not just to excite the sides, but also, using that the left channel of this one to find, muddy areas of like the bass kick, like where those are adding together. And if they're getting a little bit boxy or a little bit muddy, you can kind of just thin it out just a touch in the middle, but leave kind of the thickness for, say, the guitars or the synth stuff happening on the sides. It's just like once you start once you wrap your head around, like, you don't have to treat everything left and right. If you can really, get your mind set on like, man, I can think about sound and middle and sides, and you start kind of thinking about all of the different treatment that you can do to your mixes or your subgroups. It really opens up a lot of stuff, and I'm excited to show some of these other examples that we got too, because there's some really practical uses for it. But Matt, is there another kind of mid-side mix bus EQ that you find yourself using?
Yeah, the other one, the number 2 that I go for is the Dangerous BAX, which, the BX Digital is a very surgical, it can scoop it or boost exactly where you want it to. You can have complete control of the cue, so it's a much more versatile. But the Dangerous BAX has these really broad musical EQ curves that sound just great. So this is another option if you don't necessarily want to target very, very specific frequencies with very narrow cue. You more just want to have a musical EQ that's not soloing out specific frequencies, but more broad areas of frequencies. This Dangerous BAX EQ is a great option for that. So just like Ben was showing with the Manley Vari-Mu, rather, you can basically switch it to mid-side and you can unlink the controls. So that's the way I have it set up here. Mid-side's enabled. So the top is now the mid channel, the bottom's now the side channel. Then I have them unlinked, which is generally when I'm using a mid-side EQ, I always have them unlinked because I'm usually not affecting the mid and side bands separately. But I'm pretty much doing the same kind of thing that I was doing with the Brainworx with the BAX EQ here, but in a much more broader, gentler way. So I'm just kind of grabbing some high frequencies, and again, I'm picking 2.5 here, but since it's such a broad musical curve, it's affecting probably much more up into 7 and down into 1. It's a very big curve here. So I'm doing a very generous boost there of 3 dB, which just kind of opens up the high end on the sides. Then I'm doing a little bit of a cut on the low end on the sides, and a little bit of a boost on the low end and the mid, just to kind of reinforce the kick and the bass right in the center there. And then the last thing that I do with this one, since you only have 2 bands, a low and a high, I find that just boosting the output of the sides can really enhance the stereo image as well. So I'm just adding a little less than 2 dB boost to the side channel. So yeah, it's just to kind of get the same effect, but a different way of getting there, and a little less control, but a little bit more musicality to it. So let me just A/B this one real quick. You can hear the difference. This is with, without, and then with. So it's kind of doing the same thing, just kind of activating the side channel, especially in the high end, and then focusing the bass towards the middle a little bit. Those are both great ways to kind of sweeten what you already have going on in your mix.
And that's a great example there, Matt. And I love, you guys are hopefully noticing, like, these are all going to be like a little bit on the more subtle side, right? When you're doing stuff like stereo with. Apologies if you're on a laptop or phone speakers right now, because a lot of the stuff is going to get lost in mono, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, this is definitely one of the considerations we'll talk about a little bit later. You know, if there's things that you had to be cautious of when you're dealing with mid-side stuff, and because there certainly is. So we'll touch on those a little bit later. But I want to keep going on the EQs, because I know, Drew, you've got some really cool techniques, especially when you working with like drums, using a mid-side EQ on drums. What would you do that for, and what do you use it on?
Yeah, so far, the examples that we've shown so far are kind of just like enhancing kind of things. So this is a little bit of a different example in that this is sort of corrective in nature. So I have some drums here in this session, and there's a room mic, right? So let me just play the drums a little bit. Right, so we have these drums, and there's this room mic going on here, and this room mic, I just got it as a stereo track, but when I listen to it, it's a stereo image, and in the center, it had a lot of snare, and the snare was kind of boxy, right? But yet my cymbals on the sides felt good. Mm-hmm. So mid-side's really great. It's really great in this application as well as sort of a corrective form here, and so I'm using the Chandler. So I want some vibe here, and I want some mojo here. We've talked about the linking the controls. In this case, I started with them linked because I wanted to do some basic filtering that would apply to both, right? So that's something you might want to look at, is start linked if you're doing general shaping, and then you can unlink and do the tweaks where you're creating the differential. So I started linked, and I did my filtering, and then I switched on to I unlinked them and put it in mid-side mode. And so the basic idea here is if I solo up the room mics, and I've got a band here, and I've got it at 0.8 or 800 hertz. And as you can see, I'm gonna just toggle this in and out, and you'll hear, if you're listening with headphones, you're gonna notice that the snare comes really forward and gets really loud, but only in the center image. So let's hear that. So that's what I'm looking to get rid of. I'm looking to get rid of that sort of gonky, nasally sort of snare in the center. But so I want to do that just on the mid side. So I'm going to do a narrow and relatively deep cut. With the curve bender, it's kind of a mastering processor. So even all the way out is only -5. Although I have it in the 1.5 mode, so it's 1.5 times that. But at any rate, that's in this example of me being able to just sort of go in there. If I had done that to the stereo image, I would have taken all of the sort of the presence and the ring and the meat of my cymbals out, when in reality, all I wanted to do was to, just pull that snare out of the center image there. So
that's super. So you can use it. I love the way you're kind of illustrating this, Drew. Is like, it can be a surgical tool. You can hear like, man, I don't like the honkiness of the snare drum in the middle, but like I like the fullness that I'm getting on here on the sides. And this is hopefully what we're inspiring you guys to kind of remember, is like, just kind of remember these tricks. So like when you run across these similar sort of issues, you're like, oh yeah, mid-side EQ is going to be the perfect tool to kind of solve the issue I'm hearing at the moment. Again, because you don't have to think everything affects both sides of the signal. There's this different way of slicing it.
Yeah, and it's the reverse is true. Like in this specific example, or maybe even in this example, I might wanted to pull out some of the honk of the snare in the center image, and then simultaneously brighten the cymbals in the sides without overly brightening, the snare. So think about it. Anytime you have a stereo image and the phantom center and the sides, or the mid and the sides, you think you might want to treat them a little bit differently, then that's a situation where mid-side can really come save the day, so to speak.
Nice. Getting a couple questions here for you, Drew. One of is what you're demonstrating right now. I know we're showing this here in Pro Tools, but you can do this in Luna Live. Like this trick is not something special to the DAW. This is something that's specific to the EQ, correct?
Yeah, this is specific to this UAD plugin. So this mix happened to originate in Pro Tools, so I just used Pro Tools for this example because this is one of my clients' mixes. And but yeah, and then also stay tuned, because later in the show I'm going to show you how even if the UAD plugin doesn't support mid-side, I'm going to show you how we can still do this. And bonus, it's free. So yes, definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, this would work in Luna. This would work anywhere.
Nice. I got a question from Bruce who's asking, so can you do normal EQing and MS in one task inside the Chandler? So the answer to that is no. You have to pick if it's MS mode or left-right mode, correct?
Yeah. So that's why I mentioned it might be nice to link the channels when you're doing your initial general EQ, because you can't specifically do it both, but if you're in mid-side mode and you're doing the same exact thing to both, it's basically the same thing. So that's why I say you might start with your channels linked and do your generalized EQ that is for everything, and then unlink them to do the sort of differential, or to do the tweaks where mid versus side. So in that way, you kind of sort of can, but not really. Not directly.
There's nothing wrong with using a left, right, and a mid-side EQ, kind of in series too. You can do your general tone shaping with the left and right EQ, cut out the low ends, whatever you're going to do, and then use your MS EQ for kind of sweetening on top of it. Yeah. That definitely is a good workflow too.
Well, something real quick, just on the topic of linking, is that you can relink the controls, and if I remember correctly, Drew, it doesn't reset things, right? So unless you touch a control, it won't. It does. Yep.
No, it does. Yeah.
So this one does catch up, I guess.
Yeah.
I know. There's a few of them that as I remember, when you unlink and relink, they kind of stay relative to each other. Like I believe the Fairchild kind of keeps the difference between the two as you adjust them.
Yeah, this one doesn't. It doesn't seem, but yeah, that's a good feature. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And then I guess one of the other popular kind of UAD stereo, stereo with plugins around this one, and I think we've talked about it a couple times. We brought it up. It's this case stereo. This processor. It's kind of it's a quirky one, but it is. Yeah. It's all about MS processing and ambience. And Drew, do you mind? What is this plugin? What does it do? Why should people check it out?
Yeah, one thing before, just to this is to transition us from EQing into this, other spatial things. Let me back up once real quick and just mention something that Matt didn't mention in his, and this is kind of a mastering application here, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier with, the whole the origins of mid-side processing. One of the things that we often want to do, right, this is when using mid-side processing we're back to the BX3 EQ here, where it has this ability to do what they call it the mono maker, right? And that's this feature here where essentially what it's doing is it's monifying your mix, but only up to a certain frequency. So for example, if I play this track, and if I keep going up with the mono maker, if I go all the way up to 22K, I will collapse the entire frequency spectrum into mono, which of course it's rare you want to do that. However, it is very important that you mono-ify or collapse the low frequency information. And this used to be what mastering engineers would do when they were running a disc cutting lathe, because if you had stereo information, it could wreak havoc on the cutter and how it was able to cut the groove. Nowadays, even though we're doing things digital, it's still nice to mono-ify your bottom end, mono out the bottom end up to a certain point. Our brains don't localize these frequencies very well at all, and what you do is you create a unified phase coherent bottom end that ensures that your low end is as powerful as it can be. Think about the woofers, right? Think about your woofers. If you're asking them to do stereo information, pushing and pulling at different times, that's not going to be as tight as if you mono-ify the bottom end. And since we don't localize those frequencies, it's a good thing to do. So definitely, that alone, just mono-ifying the bottom end is a cool trick to kind of tighten things up and focus things up. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. So onto the K stereo. So one of the things mid-side's not only for EQ and compression. Here we have this guy. If you haven't, this is definitely a sleeper plugin, and you definitely want to demo it. If you've not demoed it, crack out the manual. This thing is kind of a black box, right? It really is kind of a voodoo box that we, in conjunction with Bobcats, did. It's been around for a while too, I think.
This one's been out for ages. People sleep on it though, because it's it doesn't pop up in everyone's plugin folders immediately, does it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So at its core, it uses what's called ambience recovery, and so what we're talking about here is it uses the established psychoacoustic principles, and it goes into the audio and kind of establishes where the ambience is and the early reflections, and somehow, again, I don't know, it's voodoo, but somehow it goes in there and is able to extract and recover this ambience. And so that's what the recover knob is all about. You'll notice that everything sort of relies on this recover knob, otherwise it's basically not doing anything. And then, you have the knob that does the amount. And then you also have some parameters that are that modify the behavior of the recovery. You have deep and wide, which basically, as the names would imply, deep reaches further in, so it's a little bit more it's a little bit more obvious that you're doing it, and wide is a bit more stereoized. And the cool thing about this is that this ambience recovery happens in parallel to your original signal, and it works in conjunction with these filters over here on the right hand that are to the right. So you'll notice it all comes in and out together, but these are able to modify that. So essentially what you have here is you have frequency dependent parallel ambience recovery with filtering EQ. So I just did a pretty obvious example for you guys to hear. So I've got recovery on, and I've got the amount pretty high, deep and wider on, and the EQ's in. And you'll notice, look, if you look at the filters I did, I purposely high passed up to 600, and then I went up into that 6-7K range, and just for our purposes, I'm just going to boost it 10 dB. And what you're going to hear here is when I turn this on and off, the mix is going to just have this sort of bright, wide, ethereal air added to it. And then when I take it off, it kind of goes away. So it's really interesting. So I'll start with it on, and then I'll just turn it on and off a few times.
Screw you and everything that you do. I know you don't really hate me. Don't really hate
off.
me. You move like you got something to prove, and I know you're faking.
Oh, wow.
So entertaining. I don't give up.
So those background vocals just came to life. Pretty subtle. If you're not listening on headphones. I mean, that's a pretty extreme example. I really wanted us to hear it, but you can imagine, the right amount of that, just sort of adding this sort of. What do you guys?
The background
thinking?
vocals, the reverbs, the hi hats, especially. I really noticed it on. It's giving width, life. Again, it's a bit of a finisher, a bit of like a sparkle action happening on the sides. Man, that is huge difference just right there. And then so what happens if you with that ambience control, you can dial that up or down, right? So right now you kind of got it in an exaggerated position, but you could do not only an in between. I've pulled this one out. Speaking of drum room mics, I've used this plugin on a drum room mic where it was like a little too roomy, and I wanted to tighten it up a little bit. Coming in there and actually subtracting some of that ambience can be a really cool effect.
That's good point, Ben. Yeah, you definitely have that. You can exaggerate it, and you can de-emphasize it. You can go -20 and then up to +9. The additive stuff at these extreme settings, that's probably not something you do in mastering or on a full mix. But I do this. I use these a lot. People send me mono Rhodes, like a real Rhodes that doesn't have the mono retrofit kit. I mean, it doesn't have the stereo retrofit kit. An old school mono Rhodes. This thing is like magic on a mono Rhodes. It's like instant, because it goes in there and finds like the harmonics and pushes them off to the sides, and then you do this brightening trick, and all of a sudden that mono Rhodes is like, takes up some good space.
Man, that is incredible. That's really, really cool. And yeah, if you've never pulled up the case stereo, it's labeled UAD Precision Case Stereo. If you're trying to look for it in your plugin folder right now, definitely give this one a shot on a both using it on a bus, like I mentioned. You can use it on individual tracks, using it on a master like Drew has here. Like you'll find lots of uses for it. It can be subtle, it can be extreme. But it definitely does something I've never seen another plugin really kind of focus on, this sort of processing.
Yeah, and so up at the top, all of that goes together, and then on for bonus, you have you have this mid-side gain matrix that works completely independently of the ambience recovery, and then so you have the ability to do some of the basic stuff where if you just want to do that little simple widening sweetness, turn on your MS gain, up the sides a little bit, or if you got too much side information, you want to narrow something down a little bit, then you can do the reverse, and same with mid. Sometimes in a mastering environment where you might want to just go up a half dB on the mid, if you just need to pull that vocal, just get that vocal a tiny bit more forward. You have to be careful, of course, because it's everything that's in the middle. And then the same thing here on the outside, you have on the output, you just have the ability to trim up based on whatever it is that you might have done there.
Yeah, it's what a killer tool, man. That's
yeah.
If you've been sleeping on the case stereo, don't do it. But Drew, man, you great transition. You set up perfectly to start talking about the kind of the next stage of stereo width.
Yeah.
And we've been talking a lot about just mid-side processors, but we thought a really good corollary to this, and something that a lot of us need more often than not, is a way to take a mono sound and make it sound stereo, right?
Yeah.
Like I do this all the time in mixes, and this is just overall kind of a great mixing tip, is to like really think about keeping some stuff focused in the middle, right? And so for popular music, this is going to be getting your vocal, kick, snare, bass, the core of your song, the heart of your song. A lot of times you want to kind of leave those elements right up the middle in the mid channel, and then guitar, synths, hi-hats, everything else, kind of you're painting your mix around those centered elements. But sometimes client will deliver you a guitar track that's just mono, and you're like, man, this would be great if I had one on each side, and rather than having to re-record a double or kind of invent, have a human create the stereo for you. There's a lot of cool techniques that we're going to show you real quick here that can create stereo where none exists. So I'll kick us off here with we'll walk through a few of these. These are all quick, easy little tips for adding stereoness to mono signals. So the first one here, I've just got a kind of a high percussive guitar part as part of this track. Let me just play it in solo for you guys so you can, and it's got lots of reverb and delay on it. So all the stereoness right now is from the reverb and delay, but here's the guitar by itself. There we go. So mono guitar, bone dry guitar. So one of my favorite ways to do this is, so in Luna here, what I've done, just in case anyone runs into this issue, and you guys if you're in Luna and you're like, man, how do I add a stereo effect to a mono audio file? Super easy, guys. All you have to do is make a new track, and when you make the track, just make it a stereo track. And you'll see the audio file I've pulled down onto my stereo track over here. This is actually, it's a mono file, but it's now on a stereo track. So what that means is that any plugin I insert onto that track will now be treating that mono file in stereo. Quick little easy tip there for you guys. But this is
that's like a little mono to stereo trick. It's a little mono to stereo hack, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, so that's what's setting me up to now add stereo processing to this mono guitar. So I've pulled up the Studio D stereo chorus, very familiar piece of gear here, and this was a lockdown learning for me. I think early in the office hours segments or episodes, way back when, I used to always just use this. Select which modulation mode you want, 1, 2, 3, or 4. I did not know, and I feel very embarrassed, and I'll admit it, that I didn't know that you could actually select multiple of these at the same time, and it sounds awesome. So here, I'll start with just one so you guys can hear it, and then I'll kind of toggle through a few of these. This is one of my favorite plugins to instantly pull something out of the middle and give it some sides. Instant stereo
Nice.
chorus. It's fast. It's weird. It's kind of exactly what I love. And if we bring back the reverb and delay on it, it gets even better. So you can hear the reverb and delay, they're giving me some stereoness, but by now feeding them a stereo source, I'm getting this even more complex and wider sound out of it. So yeah, Studio D.
That's cool.
That's one of my
super
go-tos
cool.
right there, man.
Yeah. Well, and hey, Ben, just so you know, that's also a great application of simple stereo pan, because one of the downsides of creating a stereo track and putting a mono fader on it is that you now have to deal with the stereo pan. But if we go into simple pan mode, now you sort of have a single track. You have a stereo track. A stereo track with a mono file with stereo processing and a mono panner, like kind of you get everything you want, but no downside.
Oh, I love that.
That's awesome.
Good call, Drew. Good call, man. So yeah, that's the Studio D. I guess Matt, do you have an example with one of your favorites?
Yeah. So specifically for adding width to like synths, I really like the Eventide H910 harmonizer. So yeah, I got a good example of that here. Here's just this lead synth line with no processing. It's very mono, right up the center. So this particular synth line is actually recorded as a stereo file, but both the left and right channels are pretty much the same. So that's why, even though it's stereo, it's still right in the center. But yeah, I'll show two different ways to use the H910 depending on if you have a stereo file or a mono file you're starting with. So since this file is stereo, it has left and right sides, I can just put an instance of the H910 directly on it. And the H910, it's actually two different, it's processing the left and right sides separately. And you'll notice just sitting here, I have this manual knob, which is the pitch knob set to 1.01, but it's actually kind of fluctuating. It's going between 1 and 1.01. So yeah, that's kind of why you get the stereo image from this H910, because it's processing the left and right side separately, and the pitch isn't perfectly stable, so you get these minute little differences between the left and right channels. And anytime your brain hears differences in left and right, that's what it perceives as stereo. So you get this kind of nice stereo spread. So this is literally just the default settings on the H910. I cranked the manual knob up to just 0.01%, and I pulled the mix down to around 50%. And that's what this sounds like. That's with, without, and with. So it's just adding subtle differences between the left and right channel that your brain then perceives as a much wider sound.
Yeah, that's cool. That one moves a little bit less than the Studio D did, right? Like the Studio D, you could hear the kind of fluttery chorusness happening on this one. You're right. This one's a lot kind of gentler, but with the width.
Totally.
Yeah.
And if you want to add even more difference between the left and right channels, you can add these delay buttons, which just add millisecond delay. And the more delay you add, then the left and right channels have just slightly different delay, and you get even wider stereo image. So let me, I'll bump up the delay while it's playing. Yeah, so it's just another way to kind of just tweak the stereo image just a little bit, and it's not just doing a widening thing; it's also giving you kind of a this cool pitch shift thing as well. So it's kind of 2-in-1. But yeah, that's if you have a stereo track that you're starting with. Let me show you a different example here. If you have just a mono track that you're starting with, so this is the same lead line, but it's just a mono instead of stereo. Just split it up. So here's what it sounds like with nothing on it. Very mono. So if I do the same exact trick with the H910, it's going to add the pitch shift thing, but since it's mono, it's going to keep it right in the center. That was a little extreme there.
Or it's gonna ring mod it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, something happened with my... Well, Yeah, I'll skip that part. But so yeah, it basically would do the pitch shift thing, but it would keep it right in the middle. I don't know why this plugin's misbehaving right now. But the way you can do it to kind of turn this mono thing into a stereo thing is send it to 2 different H910s that are each set up a little bit differently and pan left and right. So that's what I have going on here. I have a H910 left and H910 right. They're just pan left and right. I have one pitched down just a little bit to 0.99, and then I have the other pitched up just a little bit to 1.01. And I'm adding different delay to them. So the left channel has 15 milliseconds delay. The right channel is like 22.5-ish. So that will turn this mono lead into a big stereo thing, similar to the effect I showed you on the stereo track. That's with. That's without. And with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of 2 different ways to get the same effect of the H910 depending on what material you're starting with. I like this way, though, because you have much more control. I mean, if you want to make it more drastic, you can change the amount of the pitch difference between the left and right channels. You can add even more delay.
Yeah.
You can make things very, very wide and very cool sounding. So
what's really cool too is like, I mean, you're kind of doing it by using a send return, with 2 mono returns like that. It's actually much more similar to how you would do this on an analog desk, right? Like this is something you would, patch a send off the console, mult it, go to 2 different 910s, do the split, bring those back as 2 channels on it. Like this is a very old school workflow that's still relevant today because you can you get that extra control between the 2 different sides that you don't get when you're just using it in stereo.
Yeah, this is like the classic micro shift trick. If anybody's used micro shift from Sound Toys, that's what this is replicating. And you get complete control over the amount of detuning, which is just how differently tuned the left and right channels are, and the amount of delay, which is the different delay between the left and right channels. So yeah, it's a really cool way to get like complete control over that classic effect.
I love it. Nice. And we're keeping it classic here. I guess Drew, you've got a cool example here with the AMS RMX reverb.
This is an oldie but a goodie. This is kind of a problem that engineers have had for years. Whenever in rock music, whenever you want a guitar player wants to drop down to a single guitar, sometimes it's kind of hard to get a single guitar to sit right. So here I've got a song where during the verse it drops down to a single guitar that's playing the main riff, and let me just play it with and get you used to hearing that.
Once again, you're paralyzed by nature's honey. It goes down.
So you've got this single guitar, and you don't really want to make it sound like an effect, right? So, but this RMS verb, and this is something engineers have been doing for many, many decades. The room algorithms in this thing are just fantastic. So I'm going to play it again. I'll solo the guitar and I'll turn it on and off, and you'll hear just how when your ear's used to having it on, it just feels like the guitar has dimension, right? And it feels very 3-dimensional. But then when I turn it off, all of a sudden you're going to realize just how alone that guitar is, right? So I'll do it with and without, and then I'll do it in the context as well. So here's with. So it's like super dry and super kind of weird, and granted, soloed, it's a little bit much. It might feel like a little bit much, but let me do that on off in context, and you'll hear what I'm saying.
Once again, you're paralyzed by nature's honey.
So without it,
It goes down so smooth that you
and then with it,
you're not running. 'Cause you've got it.
so yeah, so you can really hear it. Yeah, it's like it just turns into this weird sort of odd bone dry thing that's kind of off to the left, but with this RMX in there, tucked in there nicely, it just has this like dimensionality to it, 3-dimensionality to it. So anyway, that's a simple trick. But
all right, wait. What preset is this? So this is AMX RMX. This is one. To me, this is one of those like reverbs that I know sounds rocking. But then when I look at it, I'm like, I get a little overwhelmed by like keypads and numbers. Is there a preset that people can get to that just immediately get that sort of sound?
I mixed this song last year, so I don't really know. I mean, it's just the room algorithm. So I think you'll notice here I have the high frequency is down, so I've dampened it a little bit.
Yeah.
It based on Pro Tools, I didn't I just built this from scratch. There's no preset part of it. There's no preset here that I built it off of. So I can't direct you to that, but it's just the room algorithm is all that is.
Because dude, it is such a cool kind of back wall. And this is, it's something you can do with the RMX. Obviously, I think it's one of those like amazing stereoizers and adds the dimensionality, like you said, Drew. It's making it sound 3D. It's bouncing off the wall in the back right corner. It's like it takes it from being a dry guitar, and you're right, when it was in context, even I missed it. Like with it, I'm not gonna immediately be able to point out, oh, there's a lot of room reverb on that guitar. But then when you take it away, you're like, who took away all the cool stuff?
And that's what's good. It's good when you don't want it to be an effect, right? Like this, because there's not really modulation to this. It's just a great, room reverb algorithm from, 30 years ago that just happens to sound really great. And I just, to be clear, I just stole this stuff from like Queens of the Stone Age and Them Crooked Vultures, and like Josh Homme, like I think uses stuff like this on a lot of his tracks, and I like that music. So like I listen to that stuff in headphones and I hear that, right? And so like this comes from just tinkering around with stuff and trying to figure out, how do I make this one guitar sound interesting? That's basically what this is good at, making one thing kind of sound interesting,
Yeah, I love that, man.
The 250 is really good at it as well. The EMT 250s, that's really good at this.
That's rad.
But yeah, so that's my little trick.
Sweet. So that's a couple of plug-in based ways of doing this. But we've got two more here on our list that we see a lot of people do for adding, for creating stereo with. And I guess Matt, let me throw it to you to kind of explain. This is the Haas effect. What exactly is that, and how and why should people use something like this?
Yeah. So the Haas effect is, like I was saying, basically anytime there's a difference between left and right channel, that's what your brain perceives as stereo, as wide. So the Haas effect is basically just delaying the left and right channels differently. So not necessarily like a traditional delay where it repeats, but literally just delaying the left channel a little bit further than the right channel, and that creates a difference in the left and right that your brain then will perceive as stereo. So the best way to exemplify this would be with the precision delay that I've loaded up here, but you can do it any number of different ways, which I'll get into in a second. But with the precision delay, basically I just have the mix set to 100%, so I have the mix soloed. I have the recirculation set to 0 milliseconds, so it's not going to repeat. There's no feedback. I have the modulation turned off. Then I have both of the left and right channels set to the lowest delay, which you can get with this plugin, which is 0.14, which is, for all intents and purposes, no delay. So if I just play it through it, you'll get that same synth line right in the middle. So I'm going to start adding a little bit of delay just to one side, and you'll hear what I mean here. If I go up to like 20 milliseconds, that's enough a delay that your brain will start perceiving as a stereo width. So it's like not necessarily enough where you could really perceive the delay, but it's just different enough where you're now, I'm hearing two different things on left and right. It sounds much wider. And you can even push it a little bit further, and you get even more of the effect. But once you start getting to like 40 milliseconds and 50 milliseconds, then your brain really starts perceiving it as two separate sounds, and you hear it more as like a slapback delay. So now you can really hear the attack of the notes separately between the left and right channels. Instead of them being one thing that's spread out across, it's now two different things in your left and right ear.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just the basic way to do it. You could also do it with the utility row in Luna. You could just delay the left and right channels separately. Where's my utility row here?
You've got it hidden.
Just have it hid. Yeah. So yeah, you could just delay the left and right channels separately using the utility row. You could duplicate the channel and delay the left and right channels. But this really opens up, pretty much any way that you process left and right channels separately is going to create stereo image. You can even do this with like EQ, where you EQ the left channel separately from the right channel, and that's all of a sudden going to give you the stereo width. But yeah, that's the basic bare bones example of the Haas effect, just delaying one side separately from the other side and kind of get a stereo width that way.
Nice. All right, and then I have the unfortunate duty of doing the only way that I am not going to recommend anyone does. But if you see your friends doing this trick, tell them, be like, hey, man, like that's cool. I know what you're going for. I don't think this is the way to do it. So we've spent this whole show showing you different ways to take stereo things, make them wider. We've now shown you guys like 3 or 4 different awesome ways to take mono and make it stereo. The one that in my book, personal opinion here, is completely unacceptable is the phase trick. So this is again, I'm using the same guitar. I've done this in the utility row. For folks who are following along at home, just if you're trying to replicate what I'm doing here, you may notice that when you try to go and do this trick, Luna tries to help you and says, no, you're going to phase reverse both of these, not just one channel. To unlink them, all you have to do, guys, is just come up to the LR here and hit unlink. And now you can break all the rules, and you can turn. So this is the same audio on both sides, except on one side it's completely out of phase. And I want to see everybody at home. I'm pretty sure we're all gonna have the same reaction here. Our heads are gonna turn on their sides. You may start spinning around in your chair. You might get dizzy. Please, nobody vomit. Here we go. Ooh.
Make it stop.
Ooh, there we go. All right, back in mono. Ooh, nope, one more time. Oh no. All right, guys. So this is I see people pull this trick a lot, and there's even like sometimes I'll find like synth presets where they've just done this into the preset, and it's just this one side in, one side out, and it makes my head spin the minute I hear this on anybody's tracks. So phase invert. Maybe there's one or two times where this is appropriate, but we've shown you guys enough tricks I think today to like break out of mono, get into stereo, that you don't have to rely on this one because it's my least favorite in the world, and I don't think anyone should ever use it.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, great.
Agreed.
I'm not not the only one here. So that's a bunch of stereo with tricks, and I guess. Oh, let's maybe before we talk about let's talk about the pitfalls here, because I just demonstrated one of the biggest pitfalls, right?
Yeah,
of like
sure did.
And you can we showed you some good examples of how to be a good user of mid-side, and a lot of it has to do with getting a good balance between your stereo information and your kind of the core of your mix. But of course, you can overdo this. Like you can take the stereo with knob, you can crank it to 200%. You can really overdo this effect. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not, but it's one of those things where you're always going to want to be listening, because the more that gets to like 200%, the more it's going to start sounding like what I just played for you guys, where it's out of phase, and it's just your audience is like, what's going on? Why does my head feel weird? But more than that, like there's a really good practical reason to not go overboard with stereo effects, and that's mono compatibility. It still matters, not as much as it used to. I remember when I was learning audio, it was all about like always make sure it's for radio purposes or whatever. Make sure you have good mono compatibility. These days, even though people are listening more and more on earbuds and headphones and stereo speakers, still like cell phones, radios, intercoms, like there's a lot of places in the world that your music may play back that are mono, and you don't know if that mono is going to be taking the left and right and summing it together, in which case like phase reversal tricks like what I just showed you, if I were to sum that to mono, the guitar completely disappears. It would actually be erased from the mix, because you sum the left and right together, all of a sudden that signal is no longer there. But even more than that, sometimes they'll only take one channel. They'll take just the left channel and broadcast it indoors, and they'll have right channels on the outdoors. So sometimes you'll just
do that. They do that.
Yeah. Oh, dude,
Really?
I've seen some I've seen some restaurants with some very questionable choices about their left to right.
That's
modern.
wild. Yeah, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, so it is one of those things like we're optimizing for great speakers, good headphones, earbuds, car stereos, like all the places that we like to check our mixes. But you always want to in the back of your mind, just hold on to this little thought of like if this was played in mono somewhere, would it still be okay? Would I still like what I hear? And that's where it's helpful to have a monitor controller where you can just press mono and check it in mono sum real quick, make sure nothing disappears. Mute one of your speakers and listen just to the left for a little while to see how it feels. Like these are all kind of good things to keep in the back of your mind as you're mixing and doing fun stereo tricks like what we've shown you guys here today.
It probably falls into that category of like put it where you think it is and then back off 10%. It's probably one of those things.
Yeah, totally
falls into that category.
Yeah. And so then let's leave them with the last trick before we get into our studio showdown for today, which is how to do mid-side processing with any plugin, including plugins
Yeah.
that don't have mid-side kind of baked into them. Like we've highlighted a lot today that have the mid-side capabilities as part of them. But so, say like an 1176 or LA2A, the sort of functionality isn't there by default. So Drew, how can people be using these plugins in a mid-side way?
Yeah, so this is thankfully this is an easy thing to accomplish, So I'll back to this mix that I was doing, and you'll notice that I have the SSL G bus compressor on my drum subgroup, which is a stereo only bus processor, and it doesn't do mid-side. It's just not part of the feature set. So what I wanted to show was, and we have these. Thankfully, there's several tools here, and we can cut and paste some links and throw them into the chat for you, for some free utilities, right? So this one happens to be from Boxengo, I guess that's how you say that. And so this one's free, and it's an MS encoder decoder. So you'll notice here that I've put one instance of it, and I put it on encode. So so similar to what Ben showed you earlier, this plugin is now outputting my left-right drums as mid and side. And what that enables me to do is to put any plugin that I want in here, but I have to it has to be special, right? It needs to be a multi-mono version of the plugin, because we need the left and right to be able to process separately. So that's key here. This is something that Luna doesn't do currently. So I'm doing this in Pro Tools. So you'll notice that I've done the multi-mono version of the plugin. And so let me show you the differences here, because what that does is now it brings up this little special area in the upper right-hand corner of the GUI. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to process left and right separately. So if I click on this, you can see that left and right are now literally two separate instantiations of the plugin. And then we have this little link button. I don't want to link them because I have them separated, but basically what this allows me to do is, here I'm looking at the right and I'm adjusting the makeup gain, and I'll leave that at 0. When I go to the left, I can adjust that, put it there. When I go back to the right, they're separate. So as you can see, in this multi-mono configuration, I'm able to process these two, the mid and the side separately. Now, in order to get it back, I simply need to do another instantiation of the free mid-side plugin, this time in decode position. Mm-hmm. And so the net result is that I go in and I now have, let me just hit play, and I'm just going to play around with these. So I can independently adjust. So there's my sides. So all the tricks that we talked about before, here I can compress the mid part of the information, have its own settings. I can make the kick and snare snap and be snappy and so forth. Meantime, on the sides, I could be adjusting and elongating the cymbals and elongating the things with different release times and different attack settings and so forth. So yeah, super easy. I mean, the tricks, the keys in this are the fact that it's encode, process with multi-mono, with a multi-mono version of it, and then decode on the backside.
Nice.
And you can do it with anything. I chose the G bus, but it could be 1176, it could be LA2, it could be any of the plugins that don't offer this. But yeah, so it's easy, very easy, and
rad.
free.
So I was like, yeah, it's a
Nice.
free little way to add that on. There's one by, I think Goodhertz also makes a MS encoder decoder. There's a couple other brands that offer that for free. And so yeah, folks kind of asking, if there was a way to replicate that sort of thing in Luna. I guess, Drew, in theory, you could set it up with a bus, maybe? Or I guess you can't split buses either, can you?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I've seen people try and do this kind of thing. But yeah, there's not any. Yeah, I've not seen a way. Myself.
I mean, if you had a stereo plugin in Luna where you can unlink the left and right channels, it would work with that. But with any of these mono control plugins like LA2 or 1176, I don't think it'd be possible right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I got another. There's a couple of people are asking, back to the the AMS reverb one. Ocean Way. It's actually. I'm so glad you guys are calling that out. That was the one that when we were playing the show, we're like, oh, we should show how Ocean Way could make a stereo thing. But we've shown Ocean Way so many times. We're like, let's show a different one. And that's where the RMX
Yeah, spread the love.
Spread the love a little bit. But yeah, you guys are totally right in the chat there. Like the Ocean Way is another great plugin to be able to do this with. And let me back up, make sure there's any. Oh, Julian was asking, does the Little Labs phase, the IBP in between phase plugin, work for that phase issue, or will undo the good usages of mid side that we're recommending? So the Little Labs in between phase, man, it's a really killer plugin. It's a very it's for those of you who don't know. Actually, here I'll show it on the screen so you guys can see this. This is such a rad plugin but typically what you'll use this for is to line things up, right? So say like a 2 kick microphones or 2 snare microphones, things that are close enough to have a phase relationship between 2 mics. That's where something like this comes in handy, because you can use the delay on the left-hand side to just basically slide one microphone backwards. So say your mics are, we're looking at a mic cabinet here. One's just like an inch or two ahead of the other one. It's going to get its sound just a fraction of a second sooner. So you can back that microphone up just a little bit by adding a fraction of a millisecond of delay. But if you guys remember to what Matt was showing us with the Haas effect, the Haas effect really starts kicking in at what, Matt, like 10, 15 milliseconds where you really start getting that separation?
Yeah, right around there.
Mm-hmm. So you'll notice the IBP only goes up to 4. So that's probably on the edge of not being able to hear it. Like you'll notice some weird phasey stuff happening as you rotate this around, especially if you have it, a hard left and right. But it's not going to get to Haas effect territory. And similarly with the phase adjust, this is, I showed the extreme of just, flipping the phase on one channel and the other. What in between phase allows you to do is it allows you to not just flip it, but actually get somewhere in between it. So yes, in theory, you could use the phase adjust on this one to put it a little bit out of phase and get a slight head turn instead of a complete head turn. But yeah, this would be a very much more precise way of doing it than just rudimentary or the kind of just flipping the button and getting a headache like I do. It's a great question there, Julian, about that one. And Drew, lots of people are giving you crap for showing Pro Tools, man. People are like, what?
Well, now this mix, this is a client mix that I did last year, or maybe even longer ago than that happened to be in Pro Tools, so it just was easier. But hey, we love all DAWs. I was like, it's not.
Guys, we've always been DAW fluid, DAW inclusive. All DAWs are great DAWs. There's great reasons to use any of them. You'll never catch any of us only using one of these tools, like Ableton, Luna, Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase. We love all these, and for all jokes aside, we do want to make sure that everyone is seeing the tools that they're using at home represented here on office hours, especially when we're talking about plugins, because guess what? UAD plugins work in any DAW, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. On top of, if you have an Apollo, they work in real time. So speaking of Apollos, now it's all of our MS stuff. If you guys had more questions, here's a good question. Hooters Girls Love Me is asking how do Ben, Drew, and Matt compare different DAWs at this point? Yeah, I think I just kind of said it. They all do. They do different things. They have different capabilities, and there's different good reasons to use any other DAW. Personally, I love mixing in Luna because of the way it sounds, and I've gotten so used to that workflow and my speed of mixing, and it's just gone through the roof. And I also personally like producing in there as well. I've got a great template that's kind of set up for my space, so I'm a huge fan of that. But there's often times where I'm pulling up Ableton to be working in kind of more of a loop-based mindset. There's times I'm going to work in Pro Tools. If a client delivers a file in Pro Tools and I need to turn around real quick, I'll just stay in Pro Tools. It is really helpful to use each tool for its advantages, but also recognize that there's reasons to use other tools as well.
Yeah.
And I like Luna better. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, but I do.
Not really. Not joking, not kidding.
Not joking, but yes, not joking.
Not joking, but yeah.
Well, great, guys. And I'm just quick little scan, make sure we hit all of the questions. I don't want to leave anybody hanging as much as we can.
Polydolmorphous. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
that's a great one. All right, so unless I find another question here in my queue, then the Studio Showdown is back. Facebook, Instagram are working this week. So let me pull up my screen here. Done screen. There it is. Studio Showdown. All right, we got. So if you guys want to participate in the Studio Showdown, it's super easy. You take a really good looking photo of your studio and you do hashtag UA office hours. That's all you gotta do. Hashtag UA office hours. We'll find it. And if you win the Studio Showdown, you're gonna get UA swag. And we've determined what that swag is. It is. I didn't bring one up with me. It's a beautiful UA Live coffee mug. So,
Nice.
Which you can't buy it. You can't buy this on Reverb. You can buy T-shirts and stuff on our Reverb store these days. You cannot buy this UA Live mug. The only way you guys are going to get one is if you come work at UA or you win the Studio Showdown. So, just saying. Hashtag UA office hours. So let's take a look at our contenders today. I went for two. Ooh. We got two of them with some pretty serious control surface setups here. So let's dive in here. This is MoMA. Sorry, I'm totally gonna get your name wrong. It is MoMA Music?
Momakic music.
Yeah.
Maybe.
UAD and a fine cigar with office hours. He's good. This totally 100%. I don't do cigars during office hours, but you know. So let's take a look here. Lots of screens. I love this. You know, we got check out this contraption here. We got the satellite tied to the iMac, the foot of the iMac, and it looks like the iMac's on another support back there. We got
Might be the most creative satellite mounting I've ever seen.
I 100% agree. And can't ignore the horse and the sticky notes as well. Sure. I wonder if this is a to-do list or affirmations.
And look at that talkback mic.
Uh-huh.
Look at that talkback mic. Is that a shotgun talkback gooseneck? That's.
I think it. It looks like a USB.
No, to the left, coming up off the desk. It's a shotgun talkback mic.
I think that's an LED. I'm pretty sure it's an LED light.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, it's a gooseneck, not a cable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have been really impressed if that was a shotgun talkback. That
Totally.
would
Be pointing it the wrong way if it was a shotgun.
But we got two slate rates, so you got tons of screen area, multiple monitors. Everything's kind of isolated here. The twin in the middle, right in. You know, we've got the volume knob right at the ready. The soft tube console 1, MIDI controller, Machina, keyboards. I like you've got the Rolly and the Lumi key. Yeah, it's just a good variety here. I noticed a subwoofer down here as well. I'm sure this is actually really, really great sounding space. Props for the chair. Being a recent studio, my most recent studio upgrade was upgrading the chair. I was definitely looking at this. I believe this is the Carl Tatz Phantom chair with that super low back and all mesh. It's sonically it's supposed to be the best sounding chair known to man.
The best sounding chair.
So they say. So everybody in the chat, let's give this we're gonna give it our rating, but you guys have a voice in this as well. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you guys rate the studio? And don't be too jealous, guys. Just be helpful. This is a great community. Support good studios. Support creative people. So we'll give it a rating. You guys give it a rating. We'll add all the points together, and we'll check out the second setup here in a second. So, I'm gonna give this one. This is a solid setup. Really cool setup. Lots of screens. I'm sure it's a super creative space. I'm gonna go ahead and give that one a 7. Drew, what would you give that?
Yeah, I'm gonna do 7, and the ding is the ceramic tile flooring is a ding. Yeah. I'm gonna ding that ceramic tile. Sorry.
So you keeping a 7 or a 6?
No, we'll do 7. We'll do 7.
Okay. How about you, Matt?
I'm going 7 too. If it had a little bit of maybe some mood lighting, a little more color to it, I might go higher. But it's got great gear, great setup, so I'm gonna go 7.
Nice. I'm gonna give it an 8 just for I'm gonna up mine just for the satellite functionality, like getting the satellite in there like that. That was It was a nice little touch. So you get a bonus point from me for that. And I was going to call it, the acoustics are there. It's not like they haven't done any acoustics, but the tile floor, like throw a little rug on that, all of a sudden your mixes are going to open up even more. So judging by the chat here, we got 6, 7 for the keyboard display, 6.5, 8, 6, 9.5, 7, 7, 7. You guys are copying us. 8, 7, 7, 8, a 3. Halo. 7.
Tough room.
7.
Tough crowd.
3. All right, you guys are all. We're just gonna go straight 7s. If you guys can't tell, this is an approximate, not a science. All right, our second setup here is from Discargan Musical NY. Music of the Lee. I'm sure it stands for New York. We pulled out the Korg Triton Extreme today, and the Kronos is resting. UA office hours. He's got a lot of cool UA gear. So let's creep in. So he called out the Triton. My eyes immediately went to the control surface. That's the big 16
S3.
fader. The S3 with the what's the one on the right here? That's the
Yukon, old artist. Yeah, that's the old artist controller. What was that they called that? You had the artist mix and the artist. I can't remember what the other one was called, but
nice. Well, and obviously,
I was gonna say 214 or 414 there.
Yeah, I think it's 414. I don't think the 214 had that same shock mount, did it?
Yeah, you might be right.
We got
what,
the
a
UA
2610 in the back.
We got no, that's the 6176. 6176 with the 1176 compressor strapped onto the 610, going to the Blackface Apollo.
Yeah, Blackface
8.
Apollo. Yeah.
Nice.
We got glyph drives, Focal solo monitors, great monitors. Interesting with the stacked top and bottom.
Yeah.
You get a vote for me. I do the same thing. I've got my main monitor and then a second above it. I dig that setup for. We got the trash can Mac Pro fan up right there. Some sunglasses for later. So we got to talk a couple things over here on the left that we got to talk about. One is a Les Paul shaped 4-string bass. That's rad. It almost kind of looks like the Hoff, like the kind of like Beatlesy bass, but but with the Jimmy Page kind of body. A little 5-string, a spindle of CDs.
Oh, where's the CD burner? It's a Mac Pro.
I know. The real question is what are those CDs for? Where do they go to, and how do you play them? And for anyone who
come on now, I still have clients that want CDs. I'm sorry, but I still burn CDs too.
We got the MPC. Which one's it? Is that the 60?
No, that's I think that's an MPC 1000.
Nice. Some other rack here that can't quite see back there. Man, this is cool. This is cool creative setup. We've got some acoustics, some RLX here on the walls, RLX under the monitors. Like, major question, just like, how do you do this? The keyboard,
yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine that typing is kind of like shoulder height. So I guess this is maybe you've got enhanced free mode at the moment. Is my guess, right? Like if you're in mixing mode, you're going all in on just control surfaces, doing all your work for you. In which case, maybe you don't need the keyboard as much. But that's maybe one of my only critiques on this one is the ergonomics of where that is, and it sounds like you maybe switch stuff out all the time, so that kind of makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, or somebody's doing a lot of high speed composing and tracking, so they're playing a lot, and then the Surface is allowing them they're arming and unarming tracks and jumping around. I could see that. So in the chat here, Julian's saying those are tiny records, not CDs. Oh, that makes much more sense. There we go.
Tiny laser discs.
Tiny laser vinyls,
Mr.
right?
Survival.
Nice. All right, so everybody in the chat, start hitting us with your guys' 1 through 10 rating. Where would you put this one? And I'm going to go in reverse here. So Matt, what would you give this our second contender?
I'm gonna give this one an 8. Seems like a great use of a small space. They're obviously a bass player. Love the MPC. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm gonna go 8.
All right. Drew, what would you give it?
Yeah, I think I gotta go 8 as well for similar. I like the faders. I like the
Yep.
orientation.
All right.
I like that. That's a unique
I know
monitor
you're a
design,
big
too.
fader guy. I know.
I am a big fader guy.
This is where we don't see eye to eye all the time. So
It's good though. Variety. It's variety.
Exactly. We got variety. All right. I would give this. I'm between like a 6 and a 7. It's got just enough to be dangerous, but yeah, I'm gonna go 7 on this one. If I was personally gonna pick which room am I gonna work in, I would probably go with our first studio here today. I love more of a machine than MPC. I love all the 3 different monitors is better than 2 monitors, obviously.
But that's a lot of reflection, isn't it? Isn't that you got monitors reflecting? That's going to create some comb filtering. So that monitoring environment, I'd be a little worried about that on the first one. That's why I went higher on the second one.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, we got 8, 7.5 from the chat. We got 8, 7.5, 6, 6. New York 0, which I think is a 7. 6.5, 8, 8.5, 8, 6, 9, 9, 7, 7, 8, 8. Ooh, God, you guys are making this one a really close one. 8, right? Not enough plants. Yeah, you're right, Paul. There's not enough plants on there. Man, this is it. I feel like chat actually gave this one a touch higher than the other. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 from the chat, which brings our
Seems fair. Yeah.
7.5 brings our total score. That breaks my spreadsheet, so we're gonna give it a full on 8. we got 31
by a hair.
by 2 points here. So Discarg musical NY. Congratulations. You're today's studio showdown winner. Awesome, good spot. And again, guys, everyone, thanks for helping us out and score this here in the chat. If you want your studio to get featured, if you want to win some UA swag, a sweet little UA mug, hashtag UA office hours. We'll find your picture. We'll pull it in for an upcoming showdown. And guys, I think with that we covered everything. Were there any lingering questions that I missed from the chat?
I don't think
Not
so.
that I saw.
No,
I think we're okay.
Remember, always plants in the studios. Get the good. You want the oxygen content of your studio to be going up and up. But yeah, guys, man, this has been such a fun show. Really fun, kind of geeking out with all of you guys. Talking about mid-side processing. We went through a lot of examples. There's a lot to go back and check out throughout the show. Compression, EQ, inventing stereo. How to even add MS to plugins that don't have MS. Man, we covered a wide array of topics here today, and it was a lot of fun because this is one of the things I love to do on every mix and master. So if you guys, if you haven't already, make sure you guys are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Hit the notify button so that your phone will ding anytime that we go live or publish a new video. If you've got music that you'd like us to feature, you know what to do. You hit us up live at uaudio.com. Send us an MP3 of your track along with a little description of how you used UA products to make it. Hashtag UA office hours for the photos. If you guys have questions or need help throughout the week, Drew, what's the best way for people to get in touch with us?
Yeah, so help.uaudio.com should always be your first stop. We have tons of resources, knowledge-based articles. It's where you can get a support ticket going. We also have a great community over on uadforum.com, so feel free to go over there and get help from our amazing user base. It's where I hang out most of the time. So if you have any follow-up questions to stuff we've done here, it's also a great resource there. So those would be my recommendations. Matt might have some more. I don't know.
No, agree with everything you said.
Awesome.
Good.
Oh, we did get a good. Spencer's asking what's for next week. Next week we got parallel processing on the plate. So we're gonna go deep, just like we went deep on mid-side today in stereo processing. We're gonna go just as deep into parallel processing next week. So I'm really looking forward to that one with you guys. So again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys back here next week. Have an awesome week. Go make some music. Peace.
See ya.